The glass shattered before anyone could scream. Elizabeth hit the display case hard, her shoulder taking the impact first, then her cheek against the polished marble edge. The sound cut through the ambient mall music like a gunshot. Shoppers turned. Phones rose. And somewhere in the crowd, a child started crying. "Look at you," Marcus said, standing over her with his hand still extended from the shove. "Still playing dress-up, pretending you belong in places like this." Blood traced a thin line down Elizabeth's temple. She pressed her palm against the cool floor, trying to orient herself, trying to remember how to breathe. The fluorescent lights overhead blurred into halos. 2 security guards materialized from opposite directions, their radios crackling. One reached for Marcus's arm. The other crouched beside Elizabeth, his voice steady and professional. "Ma'am, don't move yet. We're calling medical." Marcus jerked away from the guard's grip. "Don't touch me. Do you know who my father is? This woman is nobody. She's a liar and a—" "Sir, you need to come with us right now." The security guard's tone shifted lower, harder. "We have the entire incident on camera." Elizabeth's vision cleared enough to see Marcus's face change. The arrogance flickered. His eyes darted to the cameras positioned throughout the corridor, then to the phones still recording. His new girlfriend stood frozen near a boutique entrance, her shopping bags dangling from limp fingers. "This is a misunderstanding," Marcus said, his voice climbing half an octave. "She fell. I was trying to help her." The second guard helped Elizabeth to her feet. Her legs shook but held. She touched her temple and her fingers came away red. "Are you able to walk?" the guard asked quietly. Elizabeth nodded. Words felt stuck somewhere between her chest and her throat. She let the guard guide her toward the service hallway, away from the stairs and the phones and Marcus's voice still protesting behind her. They brought her to a small office behind the customer service desk. The EMT arrived within minutes, a young woman with gentle hands and a no-nonsense efficiency. She cleaned the cut, checked Elizabeth's pupils, asked the standard questions. Elizabeth answered automatically, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. "You might have a mild concussion," the EMT said, applying a butterfly bandage. "You should go to the emergency room." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're in shock." Elizabeth's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out with trembling fingers. The screen showed one word, MJ. She answered without thinking. "Hello." "Elizabeth." His voice was calm, but she knew that tone. It was the quiet before something broke. "Are you safe?" "I'm at the mall. There was an incident. I'm okay." "You're not okay. I can hear it." A pause. "Tell me what happened." The words came out in fragments. The event she'd been coordinating, Marcus appearing, the shove, the fall. She tried to minimize it, to make it sound smaller than it was, but her voice betrayed her with a tremor she couldn't control. "Where is he now?" Eugen asked. "Security has him, I think." "Keep him there. Don't let them release him. I'm coming." "Eugen, you don't have to." "I'm already in the car." The line went dead. Elizabeth stared at the phone, then at the EMT who was watching her with curious eyes. "That was my husband," Elizabeth said softly. The door opened and a man in a suit entered, his name tag identifying him as mall management. "Ms. Ackhaffer, we're so sorry about what happened. We're handling the situation with utmost priority. The individual has been detained and we're reviewing all footage." "I want to file a police report," Elizabeth said. "Of course, officers are on their way, but I need to inform you, the individual is claiming this was an accident. His father is Theodore Whitmore of Whitmore Financial." The EMT glanced up sharply. Even she recognized that name. "I don't care who his father is," Elizabeth said. "He assaulted me in public." The manager nodded quickly. "Absolutely. We're not disputing that. I just wanted you to be aware of potential complications." Elizabeth leaned back in her chair, pressing the cold compress the EMT had given her against her temple. Complications. That was a generous word for what was coming. Marcus would deploy his family's resources, their lawyers, their connections. He would paint her as unstable, vindictive, a scorned woman making false accusations. She knew the script because she'd lived through it before. 7 years ago, she'd been someone else entirely. The flashback hit without warning. She was 23, sitting in Marcus's apartment, their apartment, he'd called it, though her name had never been on the lease. He stood by the window, his back to her, his phone pressed to his ear. "I don't care what she thinks she wants," he'd said to whoever was on the other end. "She's not ready to make those decisions." Elizabeth had been 3 months pregnant, sitting on their couch, staring at an ultrasound photo. She'd wanted to tell her mother. Marcus had forbidden it. "Not until the 2nd trimester," he'd said. "It's bad luck." But it wasn't about luck. It was about control. She blinked and the memory dissolved. The EMT was talking to someone in the hallway. The manager had stepped out. Elizabeth sat alone in the small office, surrounded by filing cabinets and corporate motivational posters, waiting for everything to catch fire. Eugen arrived 40 minutes later. She heard him before she saw him, his voice in the corridor, low and unhurried, speaking to the manager. Then the door opened and he was there, wearing a dark suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, his expression carefully neutral. "Elizabeth." He crossed the room in 3 strides and crouched in front of her chair, his hands finding hers. "Let me see." She turned her head so he could examine the bandaged cut. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "The EMT said it's not serious," Elizabeth said quickly. "Just a small cut." "You're going to the hospital anyway." "Eugen." "Non-negotiable." He stood, releasing her hands gently. "Where is he?" The manager appeared in the doorway as if summoned. "Mr. Park, we have him in a separate security office. The police are taking statements now." "I want to speak with him." "I'm not sure that's advisable." "I'm not asking for advice. I'm telling you what's going to happen." Eugen's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "You're going to take me to him, now." Elizabeth caught his sleeve. "What are you going to do?" He looked down at her, and for a moment his expression softened. "What would you like me to do?" The question surprised her, not because he'd asked, but because he genuinely seemed to be waiting for her answer. "I want him to face consequences," she said slowly. "Real ones, not just an apology his lawyer writes for him." Eugen nodded once. "Then that's what will happen." He left with the manager. Elizabeth sat in the silence, her heart hammering against her ribs. She knew Eugen Park was powerful. She'd known it when they met 18 months ago at a conference in Seoul. She'd known it when he'd pursued her with a patience that had gradually dismantled every defense she'd built. But knowing it abstractly and watching it unfold in real time were different things entirely. The security office was larger than the one where Elizabeth waited. Marcus sat in a metal chair, his expensive suit rumpled, his face flushed and angry. His girlfriend was gone. The 2 officers interviewing him looked up when Eugen entered. "I need a moment with him," Eugen said. One officer frowned. "Sir, this is an active investigation." 5 minutes, the door stays open. You can watch from the hallway." Something in Eugen's tone made the officer pause. He exchanged a glance with his partner, then nodded. They stepped outside but stayed visible through the glass panel. Marcus looked up, his expression shifting from anger to confusion to something approaching recognition. "Who are you?" "My name is Eugen Park. I'm Elizabeth's husband." Marcus laughed. It was an ugly sound. "Husband? You can't be serious. She married you? What did she tell you, that she's some kind of victim? Let me guess, she left out the part where she tried to trap me with a fake pregnancy." "She was pregnant. You made her homeless while she was carrying your child. She lost the baby on the street." The color drained from Marcus's face. "That's not, I didn't know." "You knew, you chose not to care." Eugen remained standing, his hands in his pockets, his posture relaxed. "I know about the financial fraud, too. The clients you overcharged, the accounts you manipulated, the complaints your father's lawyers buried." Marcus stood up. "You're bluffing, you don't know anything." "I know that 3 women have filed internal complaints against you at Whitmore Financial in the past 2 years. I know that your father paid 2 of them to sign NDAs. I know that the 3rd woman quit and moved to another state." Eugen pulled a thin folder from his jacket and set it on the table. I know because I had it investigated 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks, why would you? Because Elizabeth told me she thought she saw you at a restaurant downtown. She wasn't sure. It was across the street, through a window, but she looked terrified for the rest of the night. Eugen's voice stayed level, but something cold had entered his eyes. So I made sure I knew exactly who you were and what you'd done, just in case our paths crossed. Marcus picked up the folder with shaking hands. He flipped through the pages, his expression crumbling with each document. Here's what's going to happen, Eugen continued. You're going to be charged with assault. The mall has footage. There are witnesses. Your father's lawyers won't be able to make it disappear. The financial fraud investigation will be forwarded to the appropriate authorities. Your victims will be offered settlements and released from their NDAs, and you're going to stay away from Elizabeth permanently. You can't do this. My father will destroy you. Your father is a venture capitalist with $70 million in assets. I own the building where his firm leases office space. Eugen leaned forward slightly. This isn't a negotiation, Marcus. This is me telling you how your life is about to change. Marcus sat back down heavily. For the first time, genuine fear crossed his face. Eugen straightened. If you try to contact Elizabeth, if you try to retaliate in any way, the rest of your life will become very difficult very quickly. Do we understand each other? Marcus didn't answer. He stared at the folder in his hands like it was a live grenade. Eugen walked to the door, then paused. She survived you once. She survived you and built a life you couldn't even comprehend. She didn't need me to do this. I'm doing it because she's mine to protect now, and I don't make the same mistakes you did. He left Marcus sitting there, returned to Elizabeth, and drove her to the hospital without another word about the conversation. The story broke online that evening. Someone had uploaded the mall footage. The video was 18 seconds long. It showed Marcus grabbing Elizabeth's arm, shouting something inaudible, and shoving her hard into the display case. It showed her falling. It showed the blood. Within 3 hours, it had 500,000 views. By morning, local news had picked it up. Tech executive's son arrested after mall assault. The story mentioned Theodore Whitmore's name, which brought traffic. Then someone connected the dots to the internal complaints, and the story mutated. Pattern of abuse alleged against Whitmore financial associate. Elizabeth watched it unfold from her and Eugen's apartment, an ice pack pressed to the side of her face that had bloomed into a spectacular bruise. Her phone buzzed constantly. Former colleagues checking in. Friends she hadn't spoken to in months expressing outrage. 3 journalists requesting interviews. You don't have to respond to any of it, Eugen said, setting a cup of tea beside her on the couch. I know. Elizabeth picked up the cup, letting the warmth seep into her palms. But maybe I should. Maybe that's how this ends properly. What do you mean? She turned to look at him. You found other women he hurt. They had to sign NDAs, stay silent, let him move on like nothing happened. I don't want that. I want people to know what he did. All of it. Eugen sat down beside her. That's going to bring scrutiny. People will dig into your past, your relationship with him. They'll ask invasive questions. I know, I've thought about it. She set down the tea. I spent 7 years rebuilding myself in private, changing my name, moving to another country, starting over. I thought hiding was the same as healing, but it wasn't. I was just waiting for him to find me again and prove I never really escaped. And now I want to face it, not because I need closure or forgiveness or whatever people think victims are supposed to want, but because other women deserve to know they're not alone, that it's not their fault, that they can survive this. Eugen studied her face for a long moment. I'll support whatever you decide, but Elizabeth, you don't owe anyone your story, not even the women who might benefit from hearing it. I know, but I want to tell it anyway. She gave her first interview 3 days later. The journalist was a woman named Patricia Chen who'd broken several stories about abuse in corporate environments. She met Elizabeth at a neutral location, a small office conference room that Eugen arranged. No cameras. Just a voice recorder on the table between them. Thank you for meeting with me, Patricia said, settling into her chair. I know this isn't easy. It's not, but it's necessary. Elizabeth folded her hands in her lap, a gesture she'd learned to control her nervous fidgeting. What do you want to know? Let's start with the mall incident. Can you walk me through what happened? Elizabeth did. She kept her voice steady, recounting the details without embellishment. Marcus's sudden appearance, the verbal harassment, the physical assault. Patricia took notes, occasionally asking for clarification. You knew Marcus Whitmore before this incident, Patricia said. Can you tell me about that relationship? This was the hard part. Elizabeth took a breath. We dated for 2 years. I was 22 when we met. He was charming at first, attentive. But gradually he started controlling small things. Where I went, who I saw, what I wore, I thought it was concern. I was young and stupid. You weren't stupid. You were in an abusive relationship. Elizabeth nodded slowly. I got pregnant. I was terrified but also hopeful that maybe having a baby would change things, make us a real family. Instead, Marcus kicked me out, told me he didn't believe the baby was his, told me to handle it myself. What did you do? I stayed with friends for a while, but I couldn't afford anything long-term. I ended up in a shelter. I was 4 months pregnant, working 2 part-time jobs, trying to save for an apartment. Then I started spotting. I went to the emergency room alone. They couldn't stop it. Patricia's expression softened with genuine sympathy. I'm so sorry. After that, I left. I changed my name, moved to South Korea to teach English, started completely over. I didn't want anyone from that life to find me. And no one did until 3 weeks ago when Marcus walked into that mall. How did you meet your current husband? Elizabeth smiled slightly. At a conference in Seoul, he was a keynote speaker. We had coffee afterward and talked for 3 hours. He knew I was guarded. He never pushed. It took 6 months before I told him about Marcus. He said it didn't change how he felt about me. Does he know you're doing this interview? Yes, he asked me what I wanted to happen, not what he wanted. What I wanted. That's the difference between him and Marcus. Eugen sees me as a person, not a possession. The article published 4 days later. It was thorough, balanced, and devastating. Patricia had confirmed details through public records, interviewed 2 of the other women who'd settled with Whitmore Financial, and gotten statements from mall security and the responding officers. Marcus's lawyer issued a denial that sounded increasingly hollow as more evidence emerged. Comments poured in, most supportive, some skeptical, a handful viciously cruel. Elizabeth read them once, then closed the browser and didn't look again. Eugen found her in his home office that evening, staring out the window at the city lights below. Marcus's father released a statement, he said quietly. He's putting Marcus on indefinite leave from the company and cooperating with authorities. That's it, leave. For now, but the district attorney is moving forward with charges, and 3 more women have come forward with complaints. Elizabeth turned from the window. 3 more. Your interview gave them courage. Patricia is talking to them now. Something loosened in Elizabeth's chest, not quite relief, but close. Good, that's good. Eugen crossed the room and pulled her into a careful embrace, mindful of her bruised shoulder. You did something brave today. I don't feel brave. I feel exhausted. Those aren't mutually exclusive. They stood there in silence while the city hummed below them. Elizabeth closed her eyes and let herself lean into his steadiness. The legal process moved with agonizing slowness. Marcus pled not guilty to assault charges. His lawyer argued that the mall footage was taken out of context, that Elizabeth had instigated the confrontation, that Marcus had been defending himself. The judge reviewed the video in court. The defense collapsed within minutes. Marcus changed his plea to no contest. He received 6 months in county jail, 2 years probation, mandatory anger management courses, and a restraining order. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough, but it was something. The financial fraud investigation took longer. Federal regulators moved at their own pace, methodically building their case. Whitmore Financial settled with 4 women, terms undisclosed but reportedly substantial. 2 more women filed civil suits. Through it all, Elizabeth returned to work. She coordinated events, managed logistics, built new professional relationships. She went to therapy twice a week, processing old trauma and new. She learned to recognize her triggers, to sit with uncomfortable emotions instead of running from them. Eugen gave her space when she needed it and presence when she asked. He never made her feel like a project to fix or a victim to save. He was simply there, steady and patient, loving her through the hard work of healing. 6 weeks after the mall incident, Elizabeth received a letter. It arrived at her office, forwarded through her lawyer to ensure it contained no threats or harassment. The envelope was plain, the handwriting unfamiliar. She opened it in her car during lunch break. Dear Elizabeth, I don't expect you to respond to this. I don't expect you to forgive me. I'm writing because my therapist says I need to take accountability without expecting anything in return. What I did to you was unforgivable, all of it. The way I treated you during our relationship, the things I said and did after you got pregnant, the years I spent pretending it never happened. And then the mall. I can't explain why I reacted that way. Maybe I saw you looking successful and independent, and it enraged me that you'd moved on without my permission. I'm not asking for your sympathy. I'm in jail right now, and I deserve to be here. When I get out, I'm going to work on being a better person. Not for you. You're free of me forever. But for myself, and for anyone else I might have hurt. I'm sorry. It's not enough. I know it's not enough, but it's true. Marcus. Elizabeth read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and tucked it back in the envelope. She felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not closure. Just a quiet recognition that Marcus Whitmore no longer had power over her emotional landscape. She dropped the letter in a recycling bin on her way back to the office and didn't think about it again. 3 months after the mall incident, Elizabeth stood at a podium in a community center. The room was full. 40 women, all survivors of domestic violence or abuse. All seeking resources and support. Patricia Chen sat in the back, no longer as a journalist, but as a board member of the foundation Elizabeth had started with restitution money from the Whitmore settlement. My name is Elizabeth, she began, her voice steady. 7 years ago, I was homeless and pregnant, abandoned by someone who said he loved me. I lost everything. My baby, my home, my sense of self-worth. I thought that was the end of my story. She paused, scanning the faces watching her. But it wasn't. I survived. I rebuilt. And when my abuser found me again and tried to hurt me, I fought back. Not with violence, not with revenge, but with truth. The room was absolutely silent. I'm not here to tell you that healing is easy or quick. It's not. I'm not here to promise that justice will always be served. It won't. But I'm here to tell you that you are not alone, that what happened to you wasn't your fault, and that survival is possible, even when it doesn't feel like it. After the presentation, women approached her one by one. They shared their stories, their fears, their small victories. Elizabeth listened to each of them, offered resources, made connections. This was her work now. This was how she transformed pain into purpose. Eugen waited in the parking lot, leaning against his car with his phone in hand. He looked up when she emerged, reading exhaustion and fulfillment in equal measure on her face. How did it go? He asked. It was good, really good. She climbed into the passenger seat, letting out a long breath. 40 women showed up. We connected 12 of them with legal aid, 8 with temporary housing resources. Patricia thinks we'll get funding for a full-time coordinator. That's incredible. He started the car but didn't drive yet. Are you okay? I am. She turned to look at him. I keep waiting to feel traumatized or overwhelmed, but I don't. I feel strong. Like I'm finally the person I was supposed to become before Marcus derailed everything. You've always been that person. You just needed time to remember. She reached across the console and took his hand. Thank you for everything, for giving me space to heal, for not trying to fix me or fight my battles for me, for asking what I wanted instead of assuming you knew. You don't need to thank me for basic decency. Maybe not, but I'm going to anyway. They drove home in comfortable silence. the city lights reflecting off rain-slicked streets. Elizabeth watched the familiar route pass by, thinking about how far she'd traveled to arrive back at the same place, how different she felt now compared to the terrified young woman who'd fled years ago. 1 year after the mall incident, Elizabeth passed the luxury mall on her way to a meeting. She didn't slow down, didn't look for the spot where she'd fallen, didn't catalog the trauma or measure her emotional response. She simply drove past, her mind already on the presentation she was delivering in an hour, the new partnership her foundation was developing with local universities. Her phone rang. Eugen's name appeared on the screen. "Hi," she answered, smiling automatically. "Hi yourself. How's your day going?" "Productive. I'm about to pitch our scholarship program to the Dean of Social Work at the university." "You'll do great. Call me after." "Always." She hung up and pulled into the parking garage. As she gathered her materials and checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, she noticed the scar on her temple had faded to a thin white line, barely visible unless you knew to look for it. Some scars fade, others remain, but they stop defining you eventually. They become part of your history without being the whole story. Elizabeth walked into the university building with her shoulders back and her head high. She had work to do, women to help, a future to build. Marcus Whitmore was somewhere in her past, a closed chapter, a lesson learned. She was free, not because someone had rescued her, but because she'd rescued herself, and that made all the difference. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our next powerful narrative. Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts. Your voice matters. And if you believe in the power of survival stories, smash that like button. Together, we're building a community that refuses to stay silent. See you in the next story.